right, let's switch gear and talk about HR and the great world of work, the future of work. That's how we named this panel. I have three experts here with me, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of things to talk about, especially about trends, what to look for in the future, and things like that, the current environment. And I wanted to start with a very newsy question. I think over the past month, one of the main questions about work has been the decision from Amazon to say that people should come back to work 5 days a week. Is that something that you've noticed as well in some of your clients, for instance? Who wants to take this one? Go ahead.
You can go first. It's an O of 1, right? It's an N of 1. So essentially, what we're seeing is this one company, as big as they are, demanding a certain return of people back to an office. Of course, to some folks, this is a bit of a covert situation where you're trying to alleviate some of the burn in terms of costs, and so demanding that people do something that is not very natural to them, sort of course, forces that hand. Now, if we take a few steps back and say, okay, but what do the numbers actually tell us? What do the official numbers actually tell us? If we look at all the data from census, polling, whatever else, actually the distributed work, working from whatever, so to speak, is growing significantly year by year now. And so, of course, a big brand comes out and says, no, everyone comes back in, and everyone thinks, well, what is going on here? And what's going on here is one company asking for people to come back, and to each their own, really. It's about the culture and how you decide to run your business at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah, you wanted to jump in?
Oh, yeah, well, I'll jump in and just add a little bit more data, too. So we serve over 300,000 small and medium-sized businesses across the U.S., and I always love to remind folks there's more dentist offices in the U.S. than tech startups. And so it really depends on the firm. No one size fits all. Obviously, a dentist office isn't really debating too much about being in office or not. Their patients are in the office. But we did a survey across our customer set, and what we saw was about 20% still that have the choice moving towards that full remote dynamic, about 50% being more in a hybrid, and then around 30% that are more moving back to that office setup. So just a good reminder from the data itself that there is no one size fits all.
Interesting. And do you think the power right now, it's in the hands of employees, of employers?
I think right now it really is an employee market. I think employees are demanding better tools within their employers, and employers are trying to run their businesses in smarter ways. What we see, I think, is that across industries, employers just have a really wide variety of needs. So really it depends on, like you said, it could be the dentist office, it could be the coffee shop down the street, and they're really trying to create the best possible work environment for their workers.
I know you get a lot of questions about the post-COVID world, and maybe it's time to check in once again, but is 2024 the year that, okay, we're finally done with COVID and this is the new world we live in, because it feels like we've got years and years of adjustments?
I think what we're seeing is the development of really stronger workforce management platforms that are going to allow employers to adjust to whatever their environment requires of them. I think what we're doing right now is by building better platforms and better tools for employers, whatever challenge comes, we can continue to adapt to it in a lot smarter ways. Rather than sort of fearing for the future, we're building towards a future that's much more advanced in the tooling that allows workers to maybe work in a more distributed way, or really just have tools that are much more customized to what they need.
And at Remote, obviously you're very famous for distributed teams in particular. Have you seen a change in trend as well in the numbers of teams that have international workers all over the world? Is it a growing number? And what's the distribution like for the teams?
So what we've seen is that now having a distributed workforce or hybrid workforce has a name. It used to be, there's this one company and they have an office, that's it. How about those, 10% of people that are actually not in that country, then work for the same company but are across the world? They're like, yeah, but those people are, they're a minority. And so they would not have a name. So now, after the pandemic, of all the bad things it brought us, it also brought us this normalization that, wait a second, there's no one size fits all. And so there are many ways of doing things. And on top of that, exactly as Lindsey said, we now have the tools to easily manage that. Because up until now, there was one thing we would observe is that certain companies would have caps on how many people would be able to work in this fashion. And now it's much more easy to take the leap or to grow that workforce, take advantage of all that, precisely because the tools are easier, more pervasive, and much, much better to normalize all that complexity that crosses the whole world.
And at Gusto, yeah, you've noticed the same thing. You've been around for a while, so you may have a ton of data, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, any disruptive event, COVID was obviously hugely disruptive. I don't want to get too caught up in debating what's pre, post, et cetera, but what is really clear is a bunch of stuff got accelerated by COVID, including hiring in multiple locations. We saw that in the US with multi-state hiring. We actually work with remote.com, and of our customers that have at least one employee international, over 75% of those companies plan to continue to hire employees or contractors internationally. So I don't think that trend goes away. But I was just going to add, for all the negatives of COVID, one of the things that I think is really, really exciting, in the past year, there was over 550,000 new employers started. That was a 20-year high for the number of businesses being created. And that, entrepreneurship desires, maybe, again, however it happened, different reasons, maybe people also losing jobs, but the desire to go start a business and then leveraging different tools, products, were part of an ecosystem that makes it easier than ever before for someone to take that plunge is a positive, is a silver lining, in my opinion, of the last 4 or 5 years.
But I feel like the big tech companies, they keep growing and growing. They have more and more employees every year. But does it mean that these new businesses, it mean that there is a new wave of very small companies, medium companies? Have you seen something like that too?
Yeah, I mean, 550,000 new employers is a big number. I also love reminding folks you have about 6.2 million employers in the US. Over 4 million of them are less than 5 employees. So it's fun to talk about the big tech folks out there, but there are millions and millions of these smaller companies who historically don't have access to great tools, technology. We're in a software tech conference, but a lot of times, people want to focus on mid-market enterprise. There's this gigantic segment that we're a part of serving. And it's great to have companies out there like Shopify, Square, Intuit, Atlassian that also focus on this segment, frankly.
And one thing that has been a popular saying over the past few years is now you can work from anywhere and have the same benefits, the same package, everything like that. Is this actually true, or are there still some differences between working at the headquarters and working in another city and even in another country? Who wants to, maybe?
It's much, much better. Right? It doesn't even compare, right? Because you would essentially, up until a few years, the way to work was you're either an employee, you're on payroll, or you're a contractor. And as a contractor, it doesn't matter if you have the same duties towards the company, you're typically left with the short end of the stick, right? In terms of pay, in terms of equity, in terms of benefits, be it healthcare, whatever. It could be like extra coffee, whatever it could be. But now, of course, the growth of the distribution of workforce creates a massive amount of eyes pointed and voices that rise to say, what about us, right? What about the rest of the world? And so this redistribution of wealth is a massive force to change and to improve upon this. And so we see a massive, massive improvement, not just from what companies are doing, but also local governments are doing across the world.
And we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience of tech startups. When it comes to equity, for instance, can you grant equity to someone working, let's say, in Europe or in Mexico, for instance?
Yeah, it's actually a great topic for us because today we're announcing remote equity, which is a way for companies to issue, manage, and handle all the things equity related, super easy across the world. Something that used to take quite a lot of internal know-how, legal know-how, and some pull to get things going. And then, of course, countries are so different that you end up incurring in tax mishaps and stuff like that, which is not great. And so it's another example of bringing on the future of work to today, where simplifying this heterogeneous way of equity across the world, and that's why we started to think about this and launched it as well.
And Lindsey, at Check, you have plenty of different services as well. Do you think payroll is really a key to unlock more services for employers and obviously to make your startup more successful as well?
Payroll is table stakes for every workforce management software. Really, payroll is the way that you create control over the flow of funds to your employees. So often, payroll is a pain point that people try to forget about or try to minimize, but right now what we see is that payroll can be a huge distractor for entrepreneurs who are trying to run their businesses, and there's a really big market for entrepreneurs who want to go serve those businesses in really specific ways. So think about, for example, and I think one of the cool things about the future of work is how specialized that we can become for the different industries that we're serving. So a good example of this might be Playground, so one of our partners actually, who are serving childcare facilities. They try to create workforce management that brings all of the tools that they need to run their business into one location, taking something like payroll that may have taken hours and hours of their time and condensing that into a couple of clicks that then they can go reallocate that time into actually running their business. So for us, the future of work is giving time back to those businesses and also trying to serve industries in really specific ways. So empowering our partners to solve the specific problems across industries that make them really unique, and that's harder to solve. And
having an embedded strategy has been a very important point in the world of HR startups lately. What's the breakdown for you at Check? Like, how important are these embedded clients who themselves are managing payroll for?
It's a really great question. Embedded is our only focus.
Okay.
The point of Check is actually to be empowering other businesses to become more for the employers that they serve. So our number one focus is really trying to help put those businesses on rails to become a really great payroll provider, something that's really hard. So for us, embedded is our only focus, and we're much more than an API. We try to help those platforms actually launch their payroll business. We train their support team to make sure that that's easy for them, and we even embed within their sales to train them on how to do go-to-market and payroll.
I believe at Gusto as well, you have some embedded products too?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what's fun about the panel, and we'll see if we can get everyone to agree with us in the audience, but payroll is actually really, really exciting. Now, let me pitch you on why, and then we'll get into what should be done behind the scenes. Right? As a person getting paid, I hope all of you like to get paid. It's a really magical moment to be a part of, and that was kind of our perspective.
It's a magical moment to get paid, that's what you're saying?
People like to get paid, right?
Yeah.
Who would be surprised by that? And like that's the ingredient of payroll, right? You're a part of this really critical moment in people's life, and on the employer front, you're actually helping them show gratitude, appreciation, but in a capitalist society, giving back what they are owed for the time and investment they've made in your business. So the part that usually gets people really stressed out is all the compliance, all the paperwork, all the filings, and that's what we're really thrilled to be doing for our customers. You know, we process over $500 billion of payroll at this point, and just abstracting that complexity is really the benefit for a business owner. Now, to your question on embedded, you know, this is kind of our AWS to Amazon moment. We launched Gusto Embedded 3 years ago. It's taking that 10 years of infrastructure, making it possible for any other SMB platform to go build their own payroll product natively, but they don't have to do it from scratch. They can leverage all of our infrastructure and expertise. And it's been off into the races. We've had some big partners sign like Chase, and Chase Payroll is powered by Gusto. But we think it's also a nascent market, and we're really excited to be competing in that market.
Yeah. And at Remote, do you integrate with other products? Do you have an embedded strategy as well?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the same mindset, right? It's our point with building this is we're all building things that for most people are like, oh, it's a given. But it takes quite a lot to bring it from the way that it used to be done 200 years ago to how it's done today, where people are paid almost instantaneously at the moment that payroll is run. And so all this work, and then also leveraging the fact that we take this across the world, right? And the fact that you have to run payroll in all these countries across the world. It's always better to go with friends. And so the embedded strategy is pretty much that, right? Where, it's a competitive market. We're all here talking about it. but it is literally the size of the world. And so all that we're doing, however boring it sounds to some of you, it is literally making every single person's life better and easier at the end of the month. And so it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of partnerships, and at the end of the day, that's the way to do it, I think.
But at the same time, there are high stakes when you're managing money at scale. Is this something you feel at Check? Do you feel the pressure of having a mistake when you run payroll? And
Definitely. Our number one concern is making sure that our workers that are on our platform are getting paid on time.
yeah.
One thing I think that's really interesting about high stakes, so first of all, there's money movement, but there's also the regulations that go with how you calculate and remit tax payments to agencies. I think something really interesting about our approach at Check is that we're really empowering different partners in segments and industries that are really complicated. Take, for example, agriculture. That's something that very few people understand, the rules that go with migrant workers and different H-2A regulations that are required to run payroll. That can be really scary for a farm who's starting up or different agricultural spaces to try to take on themselves. They're often doing that on pen and paper, and then we get to come in and work with partners like CISO, for example, who are meant to serve that industry specifically. And that's actually one of the ways that I think we build trust with the employers who are on their platform. It's because we're built for you. We're not just a standalone payroll product. We're trying to embed in a product that's being the all-in-one solution for that specific industry. And to me, that's a big part of the trust. It's trying to build something that's really meant for the employer.
And collectively, have you made some mistakes and you've realized, oh no, this is very bad, we have to fix this, let's call the client right away?
I think there are mistakes made all the time in payroll. Oftentimes it's a miscommunication in information. I think the thing that really matters—
That's a good mistake then.
I think they can always be trust-building moments.
Yeah.
So much about making a mistake is actually creating those customer relationships when they do happen. I think one of the things that Check does really well is how well we work with the tax agencies and trying to translate that for different employers so that they feel comfortable in that mistake. I think one of the scariest parts about remitting taxes and payroll within the US is that it takes forever to get on the phone with a tax agency to try to figure out what actually happened. And something that we do best is translating that experience for the employer. So representing them there, advocating for them, and leveraging the relationships that we've built to make that experience as seamless as possible.
And at Gusto, for instance, what's the relationship like with tax agencies?
I mean, just a big plus one. This is the trend that is actually counter to the creation of lots of new businesses. You have over 15,000 new compliance rules created every year. We call that compliance inflation, for lack of a better term. And it's at the local, state, federal level, and that's really what's fighting against folks being even more than that 550,000. It could be 800,000, 1 million in the future. It's all of that hard work, effort to navigate. And so, when we started the company, there was close to 35% of companies in the US getting fined every year for incorrectly doing their payroll taxes. We're now serving well over 5% of the companies in the US. And so I think we've made a dent, but we're hopeful to keep that trend going in terms of solving more and more pain in the customer's life. But every one of those relationships matter, right? Every single county, every single town, every single zip code. And it's not just tied to employment. You have a lot of other agencies, a lot of other government departments that might have good intent or might not, but they're also making it harder for that entrepreneur to be successful. So that's something, again, we're pretty focused on productizing and then helping our customers with.
And at the same time, this inflation of rules, it sort of creates a barrier to entry. Do you think it would be possible today to create a Gusto competitor from zero?
I think what's exciting about a big market is you always have lots of competitors. We got started, we've made some progress. We're now at 2,700 Gusties is what we call ourselves. We're honored to serve over 300,000 businesses. Our job is to use the technology that's out there, cloud, paperless, mobile, AI. And the cool part is, it isn't just software, right? There's all these different rules, requirements. I guess I can't speak on behalf of competitors, but we welcome competition. The best product, the best experience should be what wins, and our focus is on being the best possible product.
What's really cool about embedded payroll is that a lot of businesses don't now need to go reinvent what exists today. They can actually go build a really great product that serves payroll alongside the rest of their workforce management by leveraging some of the businesses that already exist to try to make that simpler.
Does it unlock some new possibilities, some new companies could be created thanks to Check or other embedded solutions?
Absolutely, absolutely. The whole point of Check is actually to try to make it a lot easier for entrepreneurs to go find a problem for a really specific type of business and go solve that. A really great example of this is one of the partners we work with, Dripos. They saw a need within coffee shops. There's hourly workers, tip calculation, they want to work on the schedule, and there's a lot of parts of their business that they want to go have work together, so they're not syncing data between systems, and they went to go solve that very specific problem. Think of every business that you can imagine out there and the type of flavor of that business. That's calling for an entrepreneur to start a business in that category.
And at Remote, do you see the same with a product like Remote? Do you have new companies created that wouldn't exist before the wave of HR startups, remote-like?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's a very common effect where once a market sees that there are a couple of companies doing well, then everyone like, oh my God, I'm going to raise money and create my own company in a space as well. And so it creates this sense of, it also works in waves, right? It's like, investors funding all the companies in the space, and then dies out because they understand, okay, it's a huge market, but you have to play well. You can't just come up and say, hey, by the way, we're now going to compete directly with Gusto and these guys are a big company going at it for a long while, but now we're going to do it with 3 people in 2 weeks. Right? It's wishful thinking. Look, with AI, I think everything is possible. I think within the tax world, specifically and compliance, it is slightly harder, and we see the same, right? In the same way that these two fine people have great companies that work amazingly, especially in the world of within the US, we see the rest of the world, which each country has significantly different regulation for running payroll, and even in Europe, which is supposed to be a unified element, is not. Yeah. So it further multiplies. That's why partnerships are so important. That's why around the world, Gusto partners with us. In the U.S., Remote partners with Gusto. And so this is why it's also so important that our tech is also leveraging all this that we don't rebuild and waste time rebuilding to further enhance the life of everyone else.
How do you prioritize the roadmap?
Based on insanity, I guess. Personally, it's based on 2 things. I think the first one is impact. Whatever is bringing more impact to our customers, that it now allows us not only to further serve our customers, but serve more customers. And then secondly is how intense can we be about it? How much great of a product can we build within this space? Because at least at Remote, we don't prioritize building stuff with duct tape. This is a really long tail venture, the kind of a business. And so what matters is you build something amazing, a great product with an excellent experience. Because not only the customers deserve and want that, it's people's livelihood, but also if it doesn't work well, you're not going to pay taxes. If you don't pay taxes, you get these things called handcuffs. Right, so.
Do you think about that?
I do think about that. Like I have a family. I want to be paid and put money on the food on the table every 2 weeks. And like me, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people doing this every week. So I do think about it quite a lot.
I'll add to that though. And this is a room full of entrepreneurs. Like, that impact of what you do matters is why we get into these fields, right? Like being able to have that type of responsibility, that type of impact, taking it very seriously. But how much of a privilege is it to be able to have that many folks trust us with something so important in their life? And obviously we take that very, very seriously. That's part of the joy of being an entrepreneur, especially in tech, is actually making your customer's life better. So.
Yeah, and we've touched on this a bit, but I want to go further. When you're building a company like Check, you can, for every feature, you can either build, I guess, buy or integrate with another company. how do you view these three things working together?
I think it really depends on what the needs are of your business. So for us, we set out to try to solve a problem that we knew was going to be really difficult for all of the entrepreneurs out there to solve themselves, so we could be embedded in their product. And that's really, frankly, very different from just integrating. Embedding means you get to own it yourselves. And so when we think about embedded, it's really about how can you customize it directly for the employer. Today, I think integrations are not enough. I think that we can become a lot more for employers with something as embedded as payroll, as what Check can provide, because it means that you get to effectively put a layer on top of that product that's customized to you. Imagine trying to set up your payroll, but you're getting asked questions about industries that are unfamiliar to you. They start to confuse you. Taxes that don't actually apply to you. Exemptions that you don't know whether you should click that button or not. That can feel really scary. So for us, when we think about integrated versus embedded means we can actually build a product that the employer at the end really deserves, that's going to guide them to make the right choices, whereas integrations, I think, tend to sort of offer more of like a generic solution. And really our belief is that embedded is the future because employers deserve that.
Okay, so there is a fourth word in this startup lingo then. Coming back to the inflation of tax rules, how do you make sure that for your customers it's not too complicated to use Gusto or Check or Remote, that there are not too many checkboxes on the site, that they can actually understand and they don't need a degree in tax compliance to understand the product?
I mean, this is, I think, just a simple answer of start from first principles. You meet small business owners, entrepreneurs, not a single one of them goes into starting a business because they want to go navigate government documents and forms. So the starting place is they shouldn't have to do any of that. And again, when we started Gusto 12, 13 years ago, that was a clear idea. The question was, could you build a product that actually was easy to use, required no training, you could set up in minutes, pay yourself or your team in minutes. And it was very fun early on to prove that hypothesis, and that's been a big part of our growth to serving over 300,000 businesses. But it's a mindset that has to continue to be there. We've expanded the product quite a bit. We do health benefits. We do a bunch of other product lines. The same mentality exists, right? And I think generally speaking, that's what software should always be about, right? Like, software is there to give you superpowers, right, as a person. If you're ever finding yourself adapting or learning or reading a training manual or having to read a book on how to use a software tool, that makes me cringe, because it's not really what software is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be there to make your life a lot easier. So that's a mentality we have at Gusto across everything we do, and I'm really excited. We're bringing a lot of that to Gusto Embedded Payroll, which is focused on enabling any small business platform to spin up and launch their own payroll product in days if they want to, for the same reason.
And asking the same question about build, buy, integrate, or embed. Have you thought about integrating with Check for Gusto Embedded, or was it just...
Well, we compete, to be clear, and so we would happily provide the same service to all of Check's customers.
But Gusto is bigger than that. Gusto
is older than that.
Yeah, I mean, we have just a lot more history covering all the edge cases. It's a big part of why our partners choose us for embedded payroll, because we've seen and kind of covered all the edge cases and complexities of local, state, federal filings and documents and payroll, and have in aggregate hundreds of years of experience of payroll knowledge on the team. So that said, it is a partnership on different dimensions. Like when we were looking to offer international employer of record hiring, that was something we could have built ourselves. We did partner and are thrilled to be leveraging Remote as our embedded partner. And that's where, again, it's an ecosystem. You have folks that you compete with, you have folks you partner with. Sometimes it's a combination, but the due north is always, how do you make the customer's life easier or better?
Okay, we don't have a lot of time. Just wanted to ask one quick question to each of you. If you weren't working in payroll right now, what would be your dream industry you would be working in? Who wants to start?
I mean, for me, maybe this is a half answer. Like, I view our work and what we're trying to do at Gusto as trying to enable entrepreneurship. I think payroll is a piece of that, but like, we're doing a lot around healthcare. I think healthcare is equally unnecessarily complex, painful, but when you look at the ingredients of it, it has this incredible opportunity to provide peace of mind to people when they get sick, or your family member when they get sick. And there's just a ton of inefficiency in the system. So
Yeah.
it's
and
like a half
also
answer.
an
'cause-
industry with a lot of complexities. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm masochistic. I get drawn to like complex, compliance-centric industries where you have so many moving parts, and like if you can solve it right, you massively simplify
Yeah.
it. We happen to be doing both at Gusto.
Yeah. In one word, Lindsey, Marcelo, do you have?
Rockets in space.
That's a good one.
I
And
think
you-
I would go for the law.
Okay.
I think one of the coolest parts of the job right now is really going deep into the legislation, the ways that laws are changing. Compliance inflation is also really an evolving community, and I think being close to that and part of changing it would be really powerful.
All right. Thank you so much for this conversation. Have a nice Disrupt, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you.